today I'm going to be doing another book review for you. This one is slightly different because it's going to be more of an discussion and more of like anxiety based discussion. And if you don't know already from the title, this is a review on Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And if you don't know what this sort of centres around, it is a character called Ava who suffers with anxiety and OCD, and that is what really drew me to the book, to read a fictional book about a character that has anxiety. So I thought I'd just have a little discussion with you guys about this book, talk about how John Green touches on the point of anxiety and how he's created this character, but also actually give a little bit of a review on the book itself, what it's about, and what I thought of it. So I'll start off by saying this is actually my first John Green book that I've read. I know, pause for the shock, but I've never really been drawn to his books. I feel they are very hyped up, and this book was no exception. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm not overly sure why I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars. I will go into it a little bit more as I talk about the book, but I think maybe it was because John Green is such a well-known, well-praised author that I just had really high expectations for this book. And I'm not saying it didn't live up to that. It was definitely a very good book, and I enjoyed it. I read it really quickly, like in a day and a half. But I'm not quite sure why I couldn't give it 5 out of 5 stars. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the plot line, talk about the book, and then I'll go into more about like the anxiety side of things. So like I said, this is about a girl called Ava, and she's best friends with a girl called Daisy, and basically this multi-millionaire man goes missing, and it turns out that Ava was very good friends with his son. So Daisy has this brilliant plan to go and get Ava and this guy's son called Davis to get back together, in hopes that he knows something about his dad's whereabouts and they can try and get the reward for sort of giving any information to the police. So throughout this book I was very sort of conflicted as to whether I really was enjoying it or not. Obviously it's a YA book, and I feel honestly that I am getting to the stage where I'm over YA fiction now. I feel that I'm 21 now, I feel that maybe I'm getting a little bit too old and I can't really appreciate it as much as if I was in my teen years. I'm also married, so that has a big part of it. I'm not like looking for love anymore, and looking for boyfriends, things like that. So I think that is what I was struggling with at parts of this book, because it was that very cliche, a girl finds a boy, you think they're going to fall in love, and there's that romantic relationship between them, which there was to some extent. Like I said, at times I just struggled to maybe enjoy it as much as if I was maybe 4 or 5 years younger. So I actually really enjoyed reading the character of Ava, not just because I could relate to her because of anxiety, but I just thought she was a very relatable character in general. I also really liked Davis and how he was so sort of supportive and understanding about Ava's anxiety. He wasn't willing to push her, he just sort of let her do her own thing, which as someone with anxiety myself I know is really, really important, not to push someone and just sort of let them get on with it, and they will ask you for help if they need it. There was moments where like they were kissing and then she started to over-analyse things and become quite anxious, and he didn't force the situation. He knew that she was suffering with this and that he was willing to go at her pace, and I totally loved him for that. I thought he was a really great example of how you can be in a relationship with someone with anxiety. One thing in this book that really sort of shocked me a little bit, but in a way it didn't shock me to read about it in a book, was they had to go through metal detectors to get into their school. This is set in America, and it is a real fact that kids in America have to go through metal detectors to make sure they're not bringing in weapons. I'm sure it does go on in a couple of schools in Britain, but it's definitely not a common thing to go through an airport style metal detector just to start your day at school, and that shows what is seriously wrong with America at the moment and their weapons and gun control. But that is for another day. But it did, if you are not from America and you're reading this book, then it may just sort of shock you to read that. As far as the ending of this book, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't typical sweetness and light, happy ending. I won't spoil it. It's definitely not an unhappy ending, but it's a reality. And it's a very real ending to it, and that is what I liked. It wasn't sort of, it didn't make, the whole book isn't glossy. It really is a real book. It faces real things that people have to go through, and that is what I liked. It didn't glamorize it, it didn't gloss over anything. It was a true book. And it does make me wonder whether John Green has suffered with anxiety and panic attacks, because he just wrote it so well and it was so relatable. So as far as the book itself, like not talking about anxiety and that, it was a good book, and that's probably why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. As far as like the portrayal of anxiety and how I felt about the book and the things it touched on, I'd probably give it 5 out of 5 stars. But I guess sort of, and I think it would have been overall as a review if I was a couple of years younger. So I definitely recommend this book. And I sort of wanted to do the review and talk about the book before I talk about the anxiety side of things and the discussion. Because they are two sort of separate things, and there's a lot to talk about this book. So straight away this book delves into the person of an anxious mind. It does go straight into it. There's no frills, no nothing. It really took you into the mind of Ava and how she was dealing with. Her anxiety manifests itself as like health-based. And again, that was something quite relatable to me. If you don't know me or you haven't watched any of my anxiety videos, a lot of my anxiety was health-based and being away and feeling ill and travel, that sort of thing. So I could see a lot of myself in Ava. And a lot of the things she's talking about. So she would get very anxious and overthink about her body and how her health was. What I did like about this book, it didn't show anxiety as one main panic attack and then that's that. If you've read Zoe Suggs' books, that is sort of a way she goes about anxiety. And I'm not saying that's a wrong way to go about it, because that is how people have it, and I've had those full-blown anxiety attacks in the past. This is just a different way of viewing it, and it shows that having like those big panic attacks isn't the only form of anxiety. Ava shows it in a very day-to-day, real life way. She's constantly dealing with it. It's constantly affecting her. It's something that's just like niggling away the whole time, but it doesn't manifest itself necessarily into these full-blown anxiety attacks. And again, that was just an interesting way I thought he went about it. So in particular, Ava has like a scab on her hand that over the years she has created sort of like an OCD over, and thinks that she needs to constantly keep this wound clean. She constantly has a plaster on it. She has to take this plaster off. She breaks the scab. She's constantly trying to clean out this wound. And she's constantly thinking that she has got like a disease running through her, that it's infected. She's constantly looking up about different like diseases and infections and how you can get them and symptoms that relates to it, and she overthinks these symptoms. And this is something that I have seen in myself in the past, is you start to over heighten your senses and your symptoms. So you may just have a little pang in your stomach and you grab onto that. You think that you are having a really bad tummy ache, you think the worst thing. You think, oh, my appendix is going to explode. Oh, what if I'm going to, like, I'm going there. What if I'm going to have diarrhea, like, and I'm away? And that's the sort of thing that would run through my head. And she is sort of, she also has that in the sense that she thinks, oh, this wound looks red, it's already infected, must clean it out. Your mind immediately goes to the worst place. And that's something I can see in myself, the way you almost create symptoms that aren't there because you overthink them, you overanalyze. I constantly, and I still do, you constantly overanalyze your body, you overanalyze every part of your body to find these symptoms that may or may not be there. Another thing this book touches on is the debate of taking medication for anxiety. Again, if you've not seen any of my previous videos on anxiety, I do take medication for mine, but that is a different story. But Ava is very hesitant to take medication. Her thought on it is, why should the manufacturers of this drug control what kind of person she is? Because at the end of the day, it does control your hormones, it does change things in you. But for me, I feel it makes me a better version of myself, and it makes me feel like I'm not going to lose my mind every day. But she is very on the fence about taking medication. She takes it, but not every day. She's not really taking it properly, and that is a big part of this book, and the debate of whether medication is right for everyone. And again, a topic that is very real to people who suffer with anxiety and have to go through, and it's portrayed in the book. There was a bit towards the end that sort of angered me, and that was Ava's best friend Daisy. They sort of have an argument about something that Daisy does. She writes a fan fiction, and it manifests itself in that Daisy starts to say how she thinks Ava's quite self-centered. She's always thinking of her anxiety. She's never thinking of anyone else, and she thinks she's quite selfish in that way, and she's always just concentrating on herself and sort of wants all the attention for herself. And that sort of angered me, and it angered Ava, and I could relate to that, because Ava didn't choose to have this anxiety. She didn't create it. It's just a thing that happened for various different reasons. I don't think we actually found out the source of like when her anxiety started, but I think it probably had something to do with the death of her dad. That's usually the way anxiety starts, is like a big trauma or some big event. And yeah, so it angered me to see Daisy think these things of Ava, because she's not asking this to be brought upon herself, and it does show how anxiety can break up relationships and put a strain on relationships. And it's definitely something that I've experienced in the past. So it showed not only the friendship levels, it also showed obviously her and Davis and being in a romantic relationship. And it did also show the relationship between her and her mum being worried about her and her anxiety. And sort of the way this book is written, so like Ava, she'll be with her friend, but she'll be disconnected, and you can tell she's disconnected, and that is the way it feels when you've got anxiety. You could be in a room full of people, but you can feel so isolated and like feel like you're not in the room. Your body's there, but your mind isn't. You're completely thinking about something else. Something else has taken a whole control of your mind. And even though people think that like you might be there, they might think you're being rude, but really it's just your mind is just constantly overworking and constantly active. So yeah, that I think is all my notes that I've got to say on this book. If you're coming across it just as like you don't suffer anxiety and just are wanting to read a book maybe to either learn more about it or just read another John Green book, then I would highly recommend it, especially if you're sort of mid-teenage years. I think it's because it's that sort of age level, it will really resonate. But also if you've got anxiety, it's a great book to relate to. And I'm glad that John Green has done this. Such a big influential writer has really put anxiety in the forefront of his book, and he's done it in such a great portrayal. I'm so pleasantly surprised with this book and all the different aspects of it. If you have read this book, let me know what you thought of it down below. I really like to open up a discussion about this book and what you thought. I know it's had pretty high praise about it, and as someone that suffers with anxiety, I'm really glad that John Green has written this book. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and this review. I think it was a bit rambly, but when aren't my videos? So yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.